Hello. Sometimes the world can feel very loud. The noise of cars, the ringing of phones, and the sound of many people talking at once can be too much. We all need a quiet place to think and to feel calm. For me, that place was an island. This is my story about finding silence. But before we begin, I have a question for you. What is a place that makes you feel calm and peaceful? It can be a park, a room in your house, or a memory. Please tell me your answer in the comments below. Now, let the story begin. Chapter 1. The Arrival. My life in the city was a river of noise. I lived in a small apartment on a busy street. Every morning, the sound of cars woke me up. Horns, engines, and sirens were my alarm clock. I worked in a large office with 100 other people. The phones never stopped ringing. Keyboards clicked all day. People talked, laughed, and argued. The sound was constant. It was like a radio that you could not turn off. After work, I walked home through crowds of people. I put headphones in my ears, but I could still feel the energy of the city. It was a nervous, fast energy. I felt tired all the time. Not tired in my body, but tired in my mind. My thoughts were loud, just like the city. I could not find a quiet moment to just be. I felt like a small boat in a big storm, always moving, always fighting the waves. I did not want to fight anymore. I wanted to find a calm sea. One day, I saw an advertisement online. It was a strange job. It was for a caretaker on a small island. The island was far away from the coast. The job was simple. Live on the island and make sure the old lighthouse was okay. The lighthouse was automatic now. It did not need a person to run it, but the building was old and historic. Someone needed to be there to check it, especially after big storms. The pay was very small, but it included a place to live, a small stone cottage. I read the advertisement again and again. An island, a lighthouse, a small stone cottage. The words felt like a soft song. I applied for the job that same day. I did not tell my friends or my family. I knew they would not understand. Why would a person leave a good job in the city to live alone on a rock in the sea? I did not have a good answer for them. I only knew I had to do it. A few weeks later, I received an email. I got the job. A feeling of fear and excitement filled me. I sold my car. I gave away most of my things. My television, my extra clothes, my furniture. I packed only what I needed into 2 large bags. I kept my books, some warm clothes, and some simple kitchen supplies. I said goodbye to my small apartment and the river of noise. A man named Captain Thomas took me to the island on his boat. The boat was old and smelled of fish and salt. The journey took 5 hours. For the first hour, I could see the city behind us. It looked like a grey monster on the horizon. Then, it disappeared. There was only the blue water and the grey sky. The sound of the boat's engine was loud, but it was a simple, steady sound. It was different from the city's noise. It was a sound with a purpose. Finally, Captain Thomas pointed to a small shape in the distance. "There she is," he said. "Your new home." The island was small. It looked like a dark green hat on the water. As we got closer, I could see the rocks on the shore. They were black and wet from the waves. I could see the lighthouse. It was tall and white with a black top. It stood on the highest point of the island. Next to it was a small stone cottage. It looked very small and very strong. Captain Thomas brought the boat close to a small wooden dock. He helped me with my bags. "I will bring you supplies once a month," he said. "There is a radio in the cottage for emergencies. But there is no internet, and your phone will not work here." I nodded. That was what I wanted. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. His eyes were kind. He looked at me like a doctor looks at a sick patient. "I'm sure," I said. My voice was quiet. He nodded slowly. "All right, the island can be a good friend, or it can be a hard teacher. "It is up to you." He got back on his boat. I stood on the dock and watched him leave. The sound of his engine became smaller and smaller until it was gone. And then there was silence. It was not a normal silence. It was a deep, powerful silence. The only sounds were the waves hitting the rocks and the wind blowing through the tall grass. The sounds were old and natural. They did not ask for anything. They did not try to sell me anything. They just were. I picked up my bags and walked up the small path to the cottage. The path was made of dirt and small stones. The cottage door was heavy and made of dark wood. I had a large, old key to open it. The inside was simple. There was one big room with a fireplace, a small kitchen area, a wooden table, and a chair. A small bedroom was off to the side with a simple bed. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust. It smelled of old wood, salt, and cold stone. I walked to the window and looked out. I could see the grey sea all around me. I was completely alone. A feeling of great fear washed over me. What have I done? But then, another feeling came. It was a feeling of peace. It was a small, fragile feeling, like a new green plant pushing through the hard ground. For the first time in many years, I could hear my own thoughts, and they were quiet. Chapter 2. The Deep Silence. The first week was the hardest. My body was used to the rhythm of the city. I woke up early, expecting the sound of traffic, but there was only the cry of a seabird. I ate my meals at the small wooden table, but there was no television to watch, no radio to listen to. The silence in the cottage was a living thing. It was heavy. It pressed on me. During the day, I walked. I walked around the entire island every morning. It did not take long, maybe an hour. The island was small, but it was full of details. I learned the shape of the rocks. I saw the different colors of the moss that grew on them. I found small pools of water left by the tide, with tiny crabs and shells inside. I watched the seals. They would lie on the rocks near the shore, their bodies dark and wet. They would watch me with their big, dark eyes. They were not afraid. I was the visitor in their home. The lighthouse was always there, watching over me. It stood tall and silent. During the day, it was just a white tower, but I knew its purpose. It was a guide. It was a sign of safety for ships in the dark. Even though its light was now automatic, its presence felt important. It was like a sleeping old soldier, still standing guard. In the evenings, I would make a fire in the fireplace. The crackle and pop of the burning wood was a comforting sound. I would read my books by the firelight. The stories in the books were my only conversations. I would read the words out loud, just to hear a human voice. It felt strange to hear my own voice in the quiet cottage. It sounded loud and foreign. Loneliness was a cold wind that blew through the cottage at night. In the city, I had felt lonely in a crowd. It was the feeling of being invisible among millions of people. Here, my loneliness was different. It was pure and simple. There was no one to be invisible to. There was only me and the island. I started to talk to myself. Not just reading out loud, but real conversations. I would describe what I was doing. Now I am cutting the vegetables for my soup. I think I will wash my clothes today. The wind sounds angry tonight. It helped to fill the silence. I gave names to things. The big rock on the north shore was the old man. The group of seals was the family. The small twisted tree near the cottage was the dancer. My mind was so used to being busy. It was always thinking, planning, worrying. Here, there was nothing to plan. There was nothing to worry about except the weather. My mind felt like a fast car that had suddenly run out of road. It did not know what to do. It kept running, but it went nowhere. I would think about my old job, my old apartment, people I used to know. The memories were like ghosts in the quiet cottage. One afternoon, a thick fog came. I could not see the sea. I could not even see the base of the lighthouse from my window. The world became very small. It was just the cottage and a soft, white wall of fog. The foghorn on the lighthouse started to sound. It was a deep, low sound. It was a sound of warning, a sound of loneliness. It called out into the white emptiness every 2 minutes. It was a sad, powerful sound. It was the voice of the island's solitude. I sat by the window for hours, listening to the foghorn. I felt a connection to it. I was also calling out into the emptiness with my small habits and my quiet voice. The fog lasted for 2 days. When it finally lifted, the world felt new and clean. The sun shone on the wet rocks. The sea was calm and blue. I felt like I could breathe again. The fog had been a test. The silence was a test. And I was still here. Slowly, very slowly, I started to change. I stopped trying to fill the silence. I started to listen to it. I learned that silence was not empty. It was full of small sounds. The sound of the wind was different every day. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it shouted. The sound of the waves told me if the sea was calm or angry. I could hear the tiny sounds of insects in the grass. I could hear the sound of my own breathing, my own heartbeat. My thoughts began to slow down. The ghosts of my old life visited less often. I was becoming part of the island. I was like the moss on the rocks, growing slowly, quietly, in my own small space. The deep silence was no longer my enemy. It was becoming my companion. Chapter 3. A simple task. After a few weeks, the newness of the island wore off. My days fell into a simple, repeating pattern. Wake up, walk the island, eat, read, make a fire, sleep. The rhythm was peaceful, but a part of me felt restless. My hands, which had typed on a keyboard for 15 years, felt empty. My mind, now quiet, needed a focus. I needed a task. One grey afternoon, I decided to explore the inside of the lighthouse. I had the key. It was a heavy iron key, cold to the touch. The door at the base of the lighthouse was thick and round. It opened with a loud groan, like a sleeping giant waking up. The inside was dark and cool. It smelled of damp stone, metal, and something else. Something like old memories. A spiral staircase made of black iron went up, and up, and up. It circled the inside of the stone walls. Dust covered everything. The only light came from the small, thick windows placed far apart along the staircase. I started to climb. My footsteps echoed in the tall, empty space. I put my hand on the central column. It was cold and solid. I thought about the men who had worked here. They climbed these same stairs every day, every night. They carried oil for the lamp. They cleaned the glass. They lived their lives inside this tower, surrounded by the sea and the sky. This was not just a building. It was a home. It was a workplace. It was a world. The staircase was long. I had to stop twice to catch my breath. Finally, I reached the top. I came out into a small round room. This was the lantern room. It was surrounded by glass. In the center was the great lens. It was beautiful. It was made of many pieces of glass, all perfectly cut and arranged in a circle. It was like a giant crystal beehive. It was designed to take a small light and make it into a powerful beam that could travel for many miles across the water, even covered in a thick layer of dust and grime. It was magnificent. It was a masterpiece of engineering and art. I looked out through the dirty glass of the lantern room. From here, I could see the entire island. It looked like a green and black ship in the vast blue sea. I could see my small cottage below. It looked like a toy. I felt very high up, on top of the world. I saw the dust on the lens. I saw the cobwebs in the corners of the room. I saw the rust on the metal railings. The lighthouse was strong on the outside, but inside, it was being forgotten. The automatic light did not need this beautiful old lens. It did not need the clean glass or the polished brass. But I felt a sadness looking at it. This place had been so important for so long. It deserved respect. In that moment, I found my purpose. It was not a grand purpose. It was a simple one. I would clean the lighthouse. I would start at the bottom and work my way to the top. I would sweep the stairs. I would wash the windows. I would polish the brass. And finally, I would clean the great lens until it shone. It was not part of my job. No one told me to do it. No one would check my work. I would do it for myself, and I would do it for the lighthouse. The next morning, I began. I found old buckets, brushes, and rags in a small storage closet at the base of the tower. I filled a bucket with water from the well. I started with the floor at the bottom. I swept away years of dust and sand. Then I got on my hands and knees and scrubbed the stone floor. The work was hard. My back hurt. My hands became rough, but it felt good. It was simple, physical work. My mind did not wander. It was focused on one thing, the stone in front of me. I was not thinking about my past or my future. I was just there, in that moment, cleaning the floor. Each day, I did a little more. I cleaned a section of the stairs, then another. I washed the inside of the thick windows. As I cleaned, I discovered small details. I found a name carved into the stone wall. A. Morgan, 1928. Who was A. Morgan? Was he a lighthouse keeper? Did he feel lonely here too? I found an old, empty pipe lying in a corner. I imagined a man smoking it, looking out at the sea. The lighthouse began to share its secrets with me. The work was slow. It took many days to clean just the staircase. But I was not in a hurry. Time moved differently here. There were no deadlines. There were no meetings. There was only the sun, the moon, and my simple task. As I worked, I felt a change in myself. My body felt stronger. My mind felt clearer. The restlessness in my hands was gone. They were busy. They were useful. I was not just living on the island anymore. I was taking care of it. I was connecting with its history. I was polishing its heart. The silence of the lighthouse was no longer empty. It was filled with the sound of my work, the scrape of a brush, the splash of water, the rhythm of my own breathing. And it was a good sound. Chapter 4. The Winter Storm. Autumn arrived slowly. The green grass turned to a pale yellow. The air became colder. The wind had a new, sharp voice. I had been on the island for 3 months. My work in the lighthouse was steady. I had cleaned the entire staircase and all the small windows. The inside of the tower felt different now. It felt cared for. The sea also began to change. The calm blue water of summer turned into a dark, angry grey. The waves became bigger and stronger. They crashed against the rocks with a sound like thunder. I watched them from the window of my cottage. I felt a new respect for the power of the ocean. Captain Thomas had warned me about the winter storms. They are not like city storms. He had said, "Out here, there is nothing to stop the wind. You will feel the full power of the sea." One afternoon, the sky turned a strange dark purple. The birds, which were usually so loud, became silent. A deep quiet fell over the island. It was a heavy, waiting silence. I knew the storm was coming. I checked the windows of the cottage and made sure they were closed tight. I brought in extra wood for the fireplace. I filled every bottle and pot I had with fresh water from the well. I prepared for the storm, like a soldier prepares for a battle. The wind started as a whisper. Then it grew into a low moan. Soon it was a loud screaming howl. It was a sound I had never heard before. It was the sound of pure wild power. The whole cottage began to shake. It was a small stone box in the middle of a screaming giant. Rain began to fall. It was not a gentle rain. It was hard and fast, hitting the roof and windows like thousands of small stones. I could not see anything outside. The world was a blur of grey water and wind. I made a fire in the fireplace. The small warm light was my only comfort. The sound of the storm was terrifying. I could hear the roar of the waves. bigger and louder than ever before. I imagined them hitting the base of the island, trying to pull it down into the sea. I felt very small and very fragile. The storm lasted all night. I did not sleep. I sat in a chair by the fire, listening. The cottage groaned and creaked. I was sure the roof would fly off, or a window would break. But the little stone house was strong. It had stood here for over 100 years. It had survived many storms like this one. It was built to endure. In the middle of the night, the power went out. The automatic light in the lighthouse, which ran on a generator, also went out. The island was plunged into complete darkness, except for my small fire. I thought about the ships out at sea. The lighthouse was dark. They had lost their guide. I felt a pang of fear for them. Lost in the storm and the darkness, I felt a deep connection to the lighthouse keepers of the past. They had to keep the light burning through storms like this. Their job was so important. They were responsible for the lives of others. My job was just to be here. I felt a new sense of humility. The storm finally began to calm down as the morning came. The wind's scream turned into a tired sigh. The rain became lighter. I looked out the window. The sea was still a mass of angry, white waves, but the sky was beginning to clear. When the storm was over, I opened the door and went outside. The island was changed. The grass was flat and wet. Small branches from the few hardy bushes were scattered everywhere. The path was muddy and covered in seaweed and shells that the waves had thrown onto the land. I walked to the edge of the cliffs and looked down. The sea was still rough, a churning, foamy green. The power of what I had just lived through was immense. I felt a strange mix of fear and wonder. My first thought was for the lighthouse. I walked to its base. It stood tall and strong. It had not been damaged. I felt a wave of relief. The old tower was a survivor, just like the cottage, just like me. I spent the rest of the day cleaning up. I cleared the path. I checked the well. The generator for the lighthouse light had automatically reset itself. Now that the worst of the storm was over, the modern technology worked. That night, as I sat by my fire, I felt different. The storm had frightened me, but it had also taught me something. It taught me about strength. The strength of the old stone buildings. The strength of the island itself, which had faced 1,000 storms and was still here. And it taught me about my own strength. I had been alone through the storm, and I had endured. The fear was gone, and in its place was a quiet confidence. I was no longer just a visitor on the island. I was a resident. I had survived my first winter storm. Chapter 5. The first green winter on the island was a long, quiet season of grey and white. The sky was often covered in a thick blanket of clouds. Sometimes it snowed, and the island would be covered in a soft white coat. On those days, the silence was even deeper. The snow absorbed all sound. My footsteps made no noise. It was a beautiful, peaceful, and lonely time. I continued my work in the lighthouse. I had moved up from the stairs to the inner walls. I washed the old stone, cleaning away the grime of decades. The work was slow and methodical. It was my anchor in the long, dark days of winter. My routine was my comfort. Wake, walk, work. Read, sleep. It was a simple life, but it was my life. I spent many hours reading by the fire. I had brought a box of books with me, and I read each one slowly, enjoying every word. They were my friends, my teachers, my connection to the wider world. But I found that I was less interested in stories about cities and busy lives. I was more drawn to stories about nature, about explorers, about people who lived simple, quiet lives. My thoughts continued to slow down. I stopped thinking about what I was missing from my old life. I started to appreciate what I had in my new one. I appreciated the warmth of the fire, the taste of a simple meal, the comfort of my bed. My world had become very small, but it was also very deep. I was learning to see the beauty in small things. Then, one day in early March, I saw it. It was just a tiny spot of green, a small new leaf pushing its way up through the cold, brown earth near my cottage. It was the first sign of spring. I knelt down to look at it. It was so small and so brave. It had pushed through the hard ground to reach for the sun. A feeling of joy, pure and simple, filled my heart. The world was waking up. Over the next few weeks, more green appeared. The grass started to grow again. Small, tight buds appeared on the branches of the bushes. The island was slowly changing its clothes. From the grey of winter to the green of spring, the birds came back. One morning, I woke up to a new sound. It was the sound of birds singing. It was a happy, cheerful sound that filled the air. I had not realized how much I had missed it. The family of seals also became more active, playing and swimming in the water near the shore. The sun felt warmer. The days grew longer. I started spending more time outside. I would sit on the rocks and just watch the sea. The water was turning from a dark grey to a bright sparkling blue. The air smelled fresh and clean. It smelled of new life. I felt like I was waking up too, just like the island. The long, quiet winter had been a time of rest and reflection. Now, I felt a new energy. I worked in the lighthouse with more purpose. My simple task of cleaning felt connected to the renewal I saw all around me. I was not just cleaning away old dirt, I was preparing the lighthouse for a new season. One afternoon, I found a small sheltered spot on the south side of the island. The soil was dark and rich. I had a few packets of seeds in my supply box. They were seeds for simple herbs: parsley, mint, and basil. I had packed them without much thought, but now they felt like a treasure. I found an old rusty spade in the storage closet. I spent the afternoon digging. I cleared a small patch of ground. I removed the stones and the weeds. The physical work felt good. My hands were in the soil. I could feel the life in the earth. I planted the seeds carefully. I gave them water from the well. It was a small, simple garden, but it was mine. It was a promise of fresh flavors, of green life that I would care for. It was another small way to connect with the island. As I watched my small garden grow over the next few weeks, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I was not just an observer of the island's spring. I was a participant. I was part of its reawakening. The first green leaf I had seen was a sign of hope. And now, my own small patch of green was my own small piece of hope that I had planted myself. I was learning that life, in its simplest form, was about growth. And I was growing too. Chapter 6. Summer Light. Summer arrived like a gentle, warm wave. The sun was bright and high in the sky. The days were long and full of light. The green of spring deepened into a rich, dark green. Small, colourful wildflowers appeared all over the island, dots of yellow, purple, and white in the tall grass. My little herb garden was growing well. The smell of fresh mint filled the air near my cottage. My life on the island had found its perfect rhythm. I woke with the sun. My morning walk was now a slow, pleasant stroll. I would stop to watch the bees on the wildflowers, or to look at the patterns the sunlight made on the water. The island, which had seemed so harsh and empty when I first arrived, now felt like a garden, full of life and beauty. The sea was calm and friendly. On warm days, I would take off my shoes and walk in the cool water at the edge of the shore. I found a small protected cove where the water was clear. I could see the smooth, colourful stones on the bottom. I would sit on a warm rock for hours, feeling the sun on my skin and listening to the gentle lapping of the waves. The city, with its noise and its hurry, felt like a dream from another life. It was hard to believe I had ever lived there. My work in the lighthouse continued. I had finished cleaning the walls and was now starting on the metalwork. The railings, the window frames, the old machinery, they were all covered in years of salt and grime. I bought special polish and soft cloths with my monthly supply order. I would spend my afternoons inside the cool lighthouse, slowly and carefully polishing the brass and iron. As I rubbed away the dirt, a beautiful warm shine would appear. It was like revealing a hidden treasure. The metal was not just metal, it was shaped with care and skill. I could see the marks of the craftsmen who had built this place so long ago. I felt like I was shaking hands with them across time. My work was a way of honoring their work. I was getting closer to the top of the lighthouse, to the lantern room. I was saving the great lens for last. It was the heart of the lighthouse, and I wanted everything else to be perfect before I touched it. The anticipation was a quiet, pleasant feeling. One afternoon, as I was polishing a brass handle, I heard a sound. It was the sound of a boat engine, but it was not Captain Thomas's boat. His visit was not for another 2 weeks. I went outside and looked. A small white sailboat was approaching the island. I felt a strange mix of curiosity and annoyance. I had become so used to being alone. A visitor felt like an intrusion. The sailboat anchored a short distance from the shore. A small inflatable boat was lowered into the water, and a man rowed to my dock. He was a young man, maybe 30 years old, with a friendly smile. "Hello there," he shouted as he tied his boat to the dock. "I hope I'm not bothering you. My name is David. I'm sailing up the coast and saw this beautiful island. I had to stop." I walked down the path to meet him. "Hello," I said. My voice felt rusty. I had not spoken to another person in a month. "You live here, all alone?" he asked, his eyes wide with surprise. "Yes," I said. "Wow, that's amazing. What do you do all day?" He was not being rude. He was genuinely curious. I thought for a moment. How could I explain my life to him? "I walk, I read, I take care of the place." It sounded so simple, so empty when I said it out loud. "Can I see the lighthouse?" he asked, his eyes shining with excitement. I hesitated. The lighthouse felt like my private space, but I could not be rude. "All right," I said, and I led him up the path. I unlocked the heavy door and we went inside. "Wow," he said again, his voice echoing in the tower. "It's so clean in here." He looked at the polished floors, the clean walls, the shining iron of the spiral staircase. He ran his hand along the railing. "Someone takes really good care of this place," he said, looking at me. "Is that you?" "Yes," I said, feeling a small bit of pride. We climbed to the top, to the lantern room. The afternoon sun was streaming through the windows. The room was bright and warm. David looked at the great lens, still dusty. Then he looked out at the view. "You can see everything from here," he said quietly. He was silent for a long time, just looking. "It's so peaceful. I've been sailing for a month to find this kind of quiet." We talked for a little while. He told me about his busy job in a big city, about how he needed to escape for a while. His story was so similar to mine. He was looking for the same thing I had been looking for. After about an hour, he said he had to go. "Thank you for showing me this," he said as we walked back down. "You have a special place here, a special life." I watched him row back to his sailboat and sail away until he was just a small white dot on the sea. His visit changed something for me. When I described my life to him, it sounded simple, but when he saw it, he called it special. He saw the peace that I was now living in. He saw the value in my quiet work. I realized that I was not running away from the world anymore. I had built a new world for myself, here on this small island. It was a world of simple tasks, of natural rhythms, of deep, meaningful silence. And for the first time, I understood that I was not lonely. I was content. The summer light filled the island, and it filled me too. Chapter 7. Polishing the glass. The day finally came. The day I would clean the great lens. I had been thinking about this moment for months. It felt like the final chapter of my project, the most important task of all. I prepared carefully. I brought 2 buckets of clean, fresh water from the well. I brought a stack of soft, clean cloths. I did not want to scratch the delicate glass. I climbed the spiral staircase, my steps feeling slow and deliberate. It felt like a ceremony. I entered the lantern room. The summer sun was bright, and the room was warm. The dust on the big lens was thick. It looked like a grey veil, hiding the beauty underneath. I started at the top. I dipped a cloth in the water and gently began to wipe a small section of the glass. The work was slow. The lens was made of many small, curved pieces of glass, called prisms. I had to clean each one individually. I had to be careful and patient. As the first layer of dirt came away, I saw the true quality of the glass. It was so clear, so perfect. It had been made by master craftsmen. It was designed to bend and focus light with perfect precision. I worked for hours. The sun moved across the sky. The light in the lantern room changed from bright white to a warm golden yellow. My arms and back began to ache, but I did not want to stop. I was completely focused on my task. My world was reduced to the piece of glass in front of me, my hand, and the soft cloth. As I cleaned, something amazing began to happen. The clean prisms started to catch the sunlight. They broke the light into rainbows. Small, beautiful rainbows began to dance on the walls and floor of the lantern room. The room, which had been plain and grey, was now filled with moving colours. It was magical. I felt a sense of awe. I was not just cleaning a piece of glass. I was waking up the spirit of the lighthouse. I was bringing the light back to life, not the electric light, but the natural light of the sun. The lighthouse was designed to work with light, and now it was singing with it. I finally finished the outside of the lens. It shone. It was like a giant, perfectly cut diamond. The sunlight poured into it and was thrown back out in a shower of color. Then, I opened the small door at the back of the lens and went inside. It was a small, tight space. I was inside the heart of the lighthouse. Here, I cleaned the inner surfaces of the prisms. It was quiet and warm inside the glass. The world outside looked strange and distorted through the thick, curved glass. I felt like I was in another world. When I was finished, I came out and closed the door. I stood back and looked at my work. The great lens was completely clean. It was brilliant. It seemed to gather all the light from the sky and hold it inside. The entire lantern room was glowing. I walked to the windows of the room and looked out. The glass of the windows was also clean now. The view was sharper, clearer than ever before. The blue of the sea was deeper. The green of the island was brighter. It was like I was seeing the world for the first time. In that moment, I understood something important. My work on the lighthouse was not just about cleaning a building. It was a reflection of what was happening inside me. When I arrived on the island, my mind was like the dusty, dirty lighthouse. It was full of old grime, of worry and noise from my past life. My thoughts were unclear. My view of the world was cloudy. Slowly, patiently, I had done the work. I had cleaned away the old dirt. I had swept away the cobwebs of my past. I had polished the dark places in my mind. The simple, physical task of cleaning the lighthouse had been a meditation. It had cleaned my spirit. Now, like the great lens, my mind felt clear. The noise was gone. I could see the world, and myself, with a new clarity. I could see the beauty in small, simple things. I could feel the peace in the silence. The rainbows in the lantern room were like the joy and hope that were now alive inside me. I stayed at the top of the lighthouse until the sun began to set. I watched the sky turn from blue to orange and pink. The clean lens captured the colors of the sunset and filled the room with a warm, rosy glow. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I had come to the island looking for silence, but I had found something more. I had found myself. Chapter 8. A Visitor. Life after cleaning the lens was different, but only in a small, internal way. The island was the same. My daily routine was the same. But I felt a deep, unshakable sense of peace. The restlessness was completely gone. I had finished my big project. And now I was content to just be. I maintained the lighthouse, of course. A little bit of dusting here, a little polishing there. It was easy to keep it clean now. It was a pleasure. I spent more time in my small garden, which was now providing me with fresh herbs for my cooking. I found new paths to walk on the island. I learned to identify the different seabirds by their calls. My connection to this small piece of rock in the sea was complete. It was my home. One late summer afternoon, Captain Thomas arrived with my monthly supplies. He was early. As his boat got closer, I saw that there was someone with him. A woman. This was a surprise. Captain Thomas had never brought anyone with him before. I walked down to the dock to meet them. The woman was perhaps in her 60s. She had kind, intelligent eyes and grey hair tied back in a simple knot. She looked at the island with a thoughtful expression. "Hello," I said to Captain Thomas. "Hello," he replied, throwing me a rope to tie up the boat. "I have someone here who wanted to see the island. This is Eleanor Vance." The woman smiled at me. "It's a pleasure to meet you," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. "My grandfather used to be the lighthouse keeper here. A long, long time ago." I was surprised. "Really?" "Yes," she said, stepping onto the dock. "His name was Arthur Morgan. He was here from 1925 to 1940. A. Morgan." The name I had seen carved into the stone wall. I felt a shiver of connection. "I found his name," I said. "Carved on the wall inside." Her eyes lit up. "He did that? I never knew. I have his old journals. He wrote about his life here every day. I've always wanted to see the place he described so vividly." I felt like I was meeting a ghost, a friendly one. "I would be honored to show you," I said. We walked up the path to the cottage and the lighthouse. I could see she was looking at everything, comparing it to the words she had read in her grandfather's journals. "It's just as he described it," she whispered, touching the stone wall of the cottage. He called this his stone ship in a sea of grass. We went to the lighthouse. When I opened the heavy door, she gasped. She looked at the clean floor, the shining staircase. "Oh," she said, her voice full of emotion. "It's beautiful." In his later journals, he wrote that the place was falling into disrepair after the light became automatic. He was worried it would be forgotten. She looked at me. "You have not forgotten it." We climbed the stairs together. I told her about my journey, about leaving the city and finding my purpose in cleaning this place. She listened patiently, nodding. When we reached the lantern room at the top, she fell silent. The afternoon sun was making rainbows through the great clean lens. She walked slowly around the room, touching the glass gently with her fingertips. "He called this the Room of Light," she said. "He wrote that on sunny days, it was like being inside a diamond. He said the light cleaned his soul." Her words resonated with me deeply. That was exactly how I had felt. She looked out the window, at the same view her grandfather had looked at every day for 15 years. "Thank you," she said, turning to me. Her eyes were wet with tears, but she was smiling. "Thank you for taking care of his home. You have done more than just clean a building. You have kept a memory alive. My grandfather would be so happy to know that someone else found peace here, just like he did." Her visit was a gift. It confirmed everything I had come to feel about the island and the lighthouse. I was not just a caretaker. I was part of a story, a long line of people who had found something special in this quiet place. My solitude was connected to their solitude. My peace was connected to their peace. Eleanor and Captain Thomas stayed for an hour. She told me stories from her grandfather's journals about brave rescues, long winter nights, and the simple joy of seeing a ship pass safely in the distance. When they left, I did not feel sad or lonely. I felt full. I felt connected. I stood on the dock and watched their boat disappear. The island was silent again, but the silence felt different. It was no longer just my silence. It was filled with the stories and the spirits of those who had been here before. I was alone, but I was not the only one. Chapter 9. The Colors of Autumn. Autumn returned, and it painted the island in colors of gold, brown, and deep red. The tall grass dried and swayed in the wind like a golden sea. The air grew crisp and cool, especially in the evenings. It was a beautiful, melancholic season, a season of letting go. My one-year contract was coming to an end. Captain Thomas had told me on his last visit that I needed to make a decision. Did I want to stay for another year, or did I want to return to the mainland? The question sat in my mind for weeks. It was a simple question, but the answer felt very complicated. Part of me could not imagine leaving. The island was my home. The lighthouse was my friend. The rhythm of the waves and the wind was the rhythm of my own heart. The thought of returning to the city, to the noise and the crowds, was like a physical pain. I had changed so much. I was a different person. That person did not belong in the city anymore. But another part of me felt a small pull towards the world of people. I did not miss the noise, but I occasionally missed a simple conversation. I missed the idea of sharing a meal with a friend. Eleanor's visit had reminded me of the warmth of human connection. I had healed my mind in solitude. Maybe now it was time to see if that healing was strong enough to survive in the world again. I spent my days walking and thinking. I would sit at the top of the lighthouse, in the room of light, and look out at the vast sea. I thought about my old life. The memories were no longer painful ghosts. They were just memories of a different person. I did not feel anger or sadness towards that life anymore. I felt a kind of gentle understanding. I had needed that life to lead me to this one. One afternoon, I was walking on the rocky north shore. The tide was out, and the wet rocks were shining in the autumn sun. I saw something that I had never seen before. It was a small wooden boat, an old rowboat, wedged between two large rocks. It was broken and half filled with sand and seaweed. It must have been washed ashore by a storm a long, long time ago. I went closer. The wood was grey and worn by the sea and the sun. But it was still a boat. It still had its shape. It had once been useful. It had travelled on the water. Now it was a part of the island. It was at rest. Moss was growing on its sides. Small shells were stuck to its bottom. It was not sad. It was peaceful. It had found its final harbour. I sat on a rock and looked at the old boat for a long time, and I felt a sense of clarity. The boat was like me. I had been broken and lost in the storm of my old life. I had washed ashore on this island, and here I had found rest. I had become part of the landscape. The island had healed me, but I was not an old broken boat. I was a person. My journey did not have to be over. The island was not a prison. It was a harbour, a place to rest, to repair, to become strong again. But a ship is meant to sail, maybe not in the same stormy seas as before, maybe on a new, calmer course. My decision became clear. I would not stay on the island forever, and I would not go back to my old life in the city. I would find a third way. I would leave the island, but I would take the island with me. I would carry its silence, its peace, its simple beauty inside me. I would find a quiet place on the mainland, maybe a small town by the sea, a place where I could still hear the waves and feel the wind, a place where I could have a small garden, a place where I could have a conversation with a neighbour, but also have my quiet moments. I had learned how to be alone. Now I needed to learn how to be with others again, but on my own terms. I had to learn how to bring the peace of the lighthouse into the world of people. When Captain Thomas came for his next visit, I told him my decision. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "I thought you might say that," he said. "The island is a good teacher, but the lesson isn't about staying here forever. The lesson is about what you take with you when you leave." I would leave at the end of the month, before the deep winter set in. I had a few more weeks to say my goodbyes. It would not be a sad goodbye. It would be a grateful one. Chapter 10. The Sound of Home. My last few weeks on the island were quiet and reflective. I did not feel sad. I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I walked all my familiar paths. One last time, I sat with the family of seals on the rocks. I watched the sun rise and set from the top of the lighthouse. I was saying thank you. I packed my 2 bags. They were filled with the same things I had brought with me, but they felt different. They felt lighter. I also packed a few new things: a smooth grey stone from the beach, a large beautiful shell, and a small dried wildflower pressed between the pages of a book. They were small pieces of the island that I would take with me. On my last day, I cleaned the cottage until it was spotless. I swept the floor and washed the windows. I left some wood by the fireplace for the next person. I wanted to leave the place better than I found it, just like the lighthouse. My final task was to go to the lighthouse. I climbed the spiral staircase, my hand on the cool iron railing. I went to the lantern room. The autumn light was soft and golden. The room was peaceful and glowing. I stood in the center of the room and looked all around. I was trying to memorize the feeling of this place, the peace, the clarity. I took one last look out at the sea, at my stone ship in a sea of grass. Then I went down the stairs and locked the heavy, round door behind me. My work was done. I heard the sound of Captain Thomas's boat in the distance. I picked up my bags and walked down the path to the dock for the last time. He helped me with my bags, and I stepped onto the boat. As the boat pulled away from the dock, I did not look back. I wanted to remember the island as I had lived on it, not as something that was getting smaller in the distance. The journey back to the mainland was calm. The sea was gentle. After a few hours, I saw the coastline appear on the horizon. It was a strange feeling. A year ago, I had been running away from this world. Now, I was returning to it, but as a different man. I did not go back to the big city. Captain Thomas helped me find a small cottage to rent in his village. It was a quiet fishing village. My cottage was small, and it was a short walk from the sea. I could hear the waves at night if the wind was right. The noise of the village was gentle. The sound of fishing boats in the morning. The cry of gulls. The distant sound of children playing. It was a human sound, but it was not overwhelming. It was the sound of a simple, real life. My first few weeks were an adjustment. It was strange to see so many people, to go to a small shop and buy food. But I was not afraid. The silence of the island had become a part of me. It was a quiet, calm center inside me. I could carry it with me anywhere. I found a simple job, helping an old boat builder repair wooden boats. The work was physical and satisfying. It smelled of wood and salt, just like my island. It felt good to work with my hands again, to be useful. Sometimes, on a clear evening, I walk down to the shore and I look out to sea. I know that my island is out there, far away. I know that its lighthouse is standing tall, its automatic light blinking in the darkness. I think of the lighthouse, clean and shining. I think of its quiet strength. I think of the lesson it taught me. Home is not a place on a map. It is not a house or an apartment. Home is a feeling. It is the peace you carry inside you. It is the quiet place in your own heart where you can go to feel calm and strong. I came to the island to find silence. I left it with the sound of home in my heart. Thank you for joining me in this story. If you enjoyed this journey and want to find more stories to help you learn English, please subscribe to the channel.